Welcome, everyone. Welcome, everyone. This is Reverend Dr. Wayne and Weathers with Reverend Robert Johnson, Conversation Unplugged podcast. This is a new journey that we're taking today. We are launching our first podcast. And so I want to thank Pastor Johnson, who is a co host with me on our radio show as we now get ready to expand the brand in the area of podcasts. Pastor Johnson, tell them a little bit about yourself, and then we're going to get started on this interview today, why Kamala Harris lost the election.
Hey, everybody. How you doing? I'm Pastor Robert L. Johnson, the pastor of Messiah United Methodist Church in Lafayette Hill, Pennsylvania. Been in ministry about 33 years, serving in the Philadelphia area, worked for the state government under Governor Wolf and strategically in other areas, in urban areas in South Philadelphia, West Philadelphia, North Philadelphia. So I'm just glad to be here so we can discuss impactful subjects that's going to help create conversation and change.
Wow. Well, good. So let's get started here. Let's get started as we fade out the music. So, Pastor Johnson, Trump has been inaugurated, and this subject is something you and I have been talking about for over 6 weeks. And for myself, working my second presidential campaign, I worked the Biden-Harris campaign, which I still proudly have the sweatshirt, in 2020 in the state of Pennsylvania as the former Deputy Faith Coalition for Faith Engagement throughout the whole entire state of Pennsylvania. And then this last go around, I was brought on as a consultant with the Pennsylvania Democratic Party to organize the African-American faith community throughout the state to turn out voters for Kamala Harris, and then found myself on a volunteer level with a group of other leaders who worked in various administrations as we were organizing faith communities in battleground states as well. And so, was able just to get a front eyes view of what was going on within this particular campaign. There's definitely some insights why she lost, and also to talk about how we can move forward. So I'm going to turn the mic over to you, and you're going to interview me, and I can just share just a robust experience of what I've learned and what I've experienced working this past campaign. So mic is yours, man.
Okay. I appreciate all of your insight as you have worked various campaigns on a national level. So let's get right down to the nitty gritty.
Sure.
The first thing is, tell me a little bit about your role in the structuring of the Pennsylvania part of the campaign for Kamala Harris for president.
That's a great question. So my role was limited. I won't say minimum. It was limited compared to my role in the Biden-Harris campaign in 2020. So let me just give some backdrop here. When the Pennsylvania, at the original time, Biden campaign in 2024, then it became the Harris campaign. There were a lot of people, unbeknownst to me, that was advocating for me to have a major role within the Pennsylvania campaign for Biden's presidential campaign, and then later transition into Harris campaign. I found out that I had individuals like Congressman Dwight Evans, someone on his staff that was advocating for me, Senator Cherie Street, who's the chair of the Pennsylvania Democratic Party, Micah Sims out of Florida. He has direct ties to headquarters. He was hitting folks up. Malcolm Byrd, I found out he was, contacting folks for them to bring me on the Pennsylvania Harris campaign / Pennsylvania Biden campaign. And so there was a whole diverse group, even to the point where folks knew my name at the headquarters level because my name was buzzing to help organize. But the bottom line is, Johnson, it never happened. And so, and we can get into that in a few minutes, why it didn't happen. So around September, Senator Cherie Street, who's again the chair of the Pennsylvania Democratic Party, he called me up and he said, Weathers, he says, I thought that they would have brought you on this campaign a while ago. He says, listen, we got to get African-American pastors and churches organized. He says, I know the work that you did with the Biden-Harris campaign in 2020 and other work that I've done with him. He says, listen, he says, I want to bring you on with the Pennsylvania Democratic Party. He said, so that you can help organize a faith community throughout the whole entire state. He was very upfront. The pay wouldn't be at the level at the presidential campaign, but he said they know that he's hearing that there were plans to bring me on the presidential campaign. So he said, you'll work for the Pennsylvania Democratic Party. And then when they bring you on to the presidential campaign, you can make that transition and the pay would increase it, et cetera, et cetera. So you ask a simple question, but it creates not the answer may have sound be more complex than need be, but that's also a mirror of how complex the campaign was.
Okay, for those of us who don't know, give us a glimpse into the interworkings, if you will, when you're dealing with a national campaign on a state level. Uh, how does that mechanism work? How do how do how do we a microcosm of how does that whole machine
Mhm.
work, especially your role in it?
So let me take you to 2020 and then show you how it was totally different in 2024. You follow me? So in 2020, when I was brought on as a deputy faith coalition, when I was brought on as a deputy faith director for faith engagement with the Biden Harris campaign, it was a very robust operation. You had at the ground level, you had what was called the coalitions department, which in the state, which I was a part of. With the ground, the coalitions department, you had those that was me, faith engagement, someone that was responsible for turning out veterans, one that was responsible for the rural area, Jewish engagement, Black male engagement, AAPI engagement. That was all of our responsibilities. Now, mind you, we were virtual, so we made history because we were one of the first virtual campaigns that has ever been run in the history of the United States of America. So then you had that level. And then on the next level, you had what was called comms. And comms was the ones that was like part of the communication. So any type of headlines that needed to get out, press releases and things like that, that was their responsibility. Then you had political. And political was the ones that dealt with the policies and the procedures and the surrogates and how you brought those in, et cetera, et cetera. And so those were multi-layered throughout the whole entire state. And so we met like once a week as a state campaign, every layer. It was robust. And then that was on a Wednesday. Then on Friday, we would the national campaign would meet with all of us. And then we would have like sessions with Jen Psaki, and you just name all of the bigwigs that was a part of Biden's administration. We literally met with them virtually as they would meet with us, tell us the strategy, keep us pumped up, etc. Fast forward to 2024, a lot of the organizational structure that was in place in 2020 was not the organizational structure that was in place in 2024. And so as I was engaging with some folks at the state level, as well as at the headquarters and everything, they may have had some of those mechanisms, but they basically combined departments. So political and coalitions would be together. You follow me? Or this department or that department, based on what I was told, would be, coalesced into one, which really created a challenge because the machine that got Biden the victory in 2020 was not the organizational structure that was replicated in 2024. So now my role as a consultant, it kind of like created some clashes because see, I wasn't employed on the Harris campaign on the state side. I was employed by the Pennsylvania Democratic Party. So what should have happened was there should have been like some direct, merging. You know what I mean? You do faith engagement, let this person do this, that, so on and so forth. But I'm not going to say it didn't happen because they wasn't bad people. But the bottom line is there was just some clashing. And I just got to a point where I didn't want to come across like the person who was doing faith engagement. I was trying to either usurp or trying to hinder what she was doing. So I just said, okay, wherever I can help, you need me, you call me. Let her do her faith, her faith assignment and everything, because she had people to report to. But I'm going to do what I know I'm capable of doing. And that's exactly what I started to do.
Do you think that the change of organization had anything to do with the change of candidate?
No, the organizational structure was in place before Harris came on board. Let me know if I misunderstood the question. I'm sorry.
No, I wanted to know if there was a different change of strategy or setup because we went from a Joe
Uh,
Biden to a Kamala Harris.
I think I think at certain levels, because I was not officially a part of the Harris campaign, I do believe that there was some changes that was made. You follow me? Um, Overall, it couldn't have been a robust change because of the amount of time Harris needed to campaign and the amount of time up to the presidential election. My humble opinion is it needed to be some tables needed to be turned. That's just the bottom line. Some tables needed to be turned. And because Harris didn't have enough time to turn the tables, she inherited what she got and she had to go with what she received. And I'll say on the record, and I'm not just saying this as a Harris supporter, her loss, my humble opinion, wasn't her fault. It wasn't her fault at all.
Okay, so let's get into that. Let's
Mhm.
talk. Let's talk a little bit as you see it. And let's break it down. What do you think and just give me a few bullet points of why you think she lost in the
Mhm.
fashion in which she did.
One, ground game. Trump was very organized. Ground game. You got me?
Okay.
Um, Kamala Harris had the great, what's the right word to use? She had the great aerial attack. She had the celebrities, she had the fanfare, she had the wind behind her sail, et cetera, et cetera. But the ground game wasn't strong. And I'm going to call it for what it is. And some will criticize me and say he's wrong. This is just my humble opinion. The ground game wasn't strong at all. Um, Number two, there was a lot of disorganization. And I'll say it straight up from what I witnessed on the faith side and what we witnessed on the faith side as well. Disorganized. Apples didn't know what oranges was doing. Oranges didn't know what apples was doing. And it just created a lot of button of heads. Like case in point. Uh, so during the campaign, I get a call, and I won't mention the person's name. A person asked me, he was like, Wayne, this campaign is in trouble. And I said, what's going on? He said, the person said to me, there was an event in Philadelphia that featured Kamala Harris' sister and Senator Casey. And by the time they got to the event, apples didn't know what oranges was doing. Oranges didn't know what apples was doing. It was very disorganized by the time that they got to this particular event. And I end up seeing that throughout the campaign as well. So one, poor ground game. Two, disorganization. And three, from the faith side, I can't speak from the other side. From the faith side, people wouldn't listen. You give them the advice of what's needed to do A, B, C, X, Y, and Z, and folks wouldn't listen. And finally, I can't speak for any other ethnicity, but I can speak for African Americans. They took African Americans and they took African American churches for granted. And I think those four components alone, right? Those four components alone caused them to lose this election.
Okay, so talk a little bit about that. Tell me, how do you think from the Democratic Party, the
Mm-hmm.
African American vote, the African American church and community has been a staple for the Democratic Party for over 50 years.
Right.
And they have um, from Jimmy Carter to Barack Obama.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, the black church, the black religious organizations, and the black community has been paramount, even in getting in Joe Biden.
Mm-hmm.
Even though he had help because nobody really wanted Trump in for that second consecutive term. What went wrong this time with the Democratic Party? And I'm not talking about Kamala Harris because she inherited
Right.
this mess. But what happened in the Democratic Party? And I think if I may, and please correct me if I'm wrong, we saw this slide at Hillary Clinton.
Mm-hmm.
We started the disrespect of the African American and the taking for granted of the votes during the Hillary Clinton campaign. But now tell us, as you were there, as you were part of the faith side, tell us what your experience was, what you heard, what you felt, and let our audience know exactly where we were then and where do we go from here.
Sure. So let me say this: the disconnect starts at the local level. Okay, it starts at the local level, and then it rises up to the headquarter level, if that makes any sense. So, just for those who are not in the Philadelphia area, politics in Philadelphia works as the following: there is city council, right? There are the ward leaders, and then there are the block captains, right? And then you have the chair of the party, the city party, and everything. And so, and this isn't a jab against city council. This is just to give folks just an overview of how the intricacies work in Philadelphia: city council, ward leaders, block captains. I know one or two block captains, and I know one or two ward leaders. And so after the election, I was like, yo, what happened? How did we lose this election? Right. Because y'all also serve as political affairs committee chair, Black Clergy of Philadelphia Vicinity. So I keep Black clergy plugged in as well. And I don't want to discount the Baptist Pastors Ministers Conference as well as Pennsylvania Baptist State Convention. And so I asked the hard questions. And I asked, okay, when I started to see the fallout between the party chair, Bob Brady, and I believe his name is Brendan McPhillips, if I'm not mistaken, I had to report to him during the Biden-Harris campaign. It was he, Nikki Lou, and Sincere Harris. Those are the three. Those are the top three I had to report to. The direct person I had to report to, I just want to give credit where credit is due, is Kiva Clark. She's in LA. And then Manny Guzman, he's a state rep out of Reading. But the top people was at that time in the 2020 campaign was Nikki Lou, Brendan McPhillips, as well as Sincere Harris. And let me jump to 2024. So after the election and everything, former Congressman Bob Brady, who's the chairman of the Philadelphia Democratic Party, made the statement that Kamala didn't hardly meet with him. Vice President Kamala Harris didn't meet with him, et cetera. And her exact words was, Josh should have chose someone else, which really didn't set well with me. Although I have an okay relationship with Chairman Brady, Bob Brady. And so I made some calls and I started to ask, okay, the way you get boots on the ground in Philadelphia, it definitely has to be the ward leaders and the block captains for sure. And I talked to two block captains. Now, mind you, that's just two out of a whole group of block captains. So there's more than two in Philadelphia, right? And I says, did Brady meet with y'all? Ward leaders meet with y'all? Did y'all get a strategy, et cetera, et cetera? And they told me, no, we didn't hear from Brady. And I was like, what? He says, we did not hear from Brady. And so if there's no communication between the ward leaders and the block captains, right, from the party chair, then there's no way for voter turnout to occur in Philadelphia. But what Trump did was he went in low propensity areas that the Democrats have failed to go into in order to share their agenda and also to turn out voters. And he didn't just do this in 2024. And I don't say this as a Trump fan or a Trump supporter. You got me? I ride with Biden Harris all day. I ride with Harris all day. But I can sit back and review and look and strategize and ask what went wrong, because these are the questions we need to ask as 2026 is around the corner for congressional seats and Senate seats, as well as 2028, the next presidential election. And so when I talked to a couple of block captains and everything who happen to be clergy, they says, no, we didn't hear from the party chair. They was like, we hardly didn't hear from anybody. So if you didn't hardly hear from anybody, then how in the world can you get boots on the ground to turn out voters in low propensity areas or in the wards, et cetera? You can't get robust voter turnout to have an effect on this upcoming election. And this decline has been seen since Governor Shapiro, when he ran in the primary. When he ran in the primary, if I'm not mistaken, it's either 22 or 25% voter turnout in the primary. When he got elected, I think it was almost 50%. When Sherelle Parker, who I have a great relationship with, Mayor Sherelle Parker, and due respect, when she ran in her general election, I think it was only 35% total voter turnout. So there's been a decline, and that's not a reflection on Shapiro. It's not a reflection on Mayor Parker. It's a reflection of the system that is in place that are not turning out voters. But when certain ones are interviewed, and then you read in the Washington Post where the statements are made that, people are not coming out because they just don't want to vote, you don't understand the nature of the community. So that's at the local level. Statewide and everything, I won't say statewide as far as the Pennsylvania Democratic Party, but I'll say statewide in regards to campaigning and everything like that. I heard from good friend in Pittsburgh, Will Anderson, who's part of the Black Caucus, Democratic Black Caucus, and he was telling me whether there isn't any there isn't any Harris signs in Pittsburgh. This is around September. And I have a church member who works for the union, and she says she's in Pittsburgh a lot. And she was like, Pastor, I don't hardly see any Harris signs. She says, Pastor, Trump signs are everywhere. She says, but the Harris signs aren't hardly anywhere. You follow me? And then Will Anderson said to me, he said, yo, man, he said, this campaign is in trouble. He said, Trump is sending buses into the projects to turn out voters. He says, but we ain't hardly seeing folks from our own party. You got me? And so all of this statewide was going on where when you don't keep in contact, or you choose not to, how can you say, keep in contact with your constituents and you take them for granted, they stay at home. And so I know you asked one question. It sounds like, I hope I'm not rambling, but these are some of the components that I witnessed in this campaign that said, yo, I knew we were in trouble around the middle of October.
This question is going to be hard hitting. So I want you to take a beat before you answer.
Sure.
Does the disrespect of the Democratic Party around the Black church has to do with the Black church relevance in our communities?
Wow, that's that's a heavy question. So when I pause,
in other words,
no.
Do they perceive us to be a strong force in our own communities that demand the respect of our voting bloc?
So my hesitancy is not to answer the question. I'm just really thinking how to answer. So I'm just going to just go straight at it. And so this is what I've witnessed. You got me? Mm-hmm. There's a caste system, right? There is a caste system in Philadelphia and throughout the state of Pennsylvania when it comes to Black churches. And the caste system is, we're only going to target the churches that have a certain amount of members. So if you got 10,000 or 5,000 or 1,000, your top priority, right? If you have 1,000 or less or 500, but based on your name recognition, right, you'll get some attention. If you are 100 or less, but your name is prominent, then you will get, attention in order where surrogates will come or they'll get in contact with you to turn out voters. But if you are 100 and less and they don't know of you and they think that you're insignificant, they won't reach out to you. They won't touch you at all. Case in point, I don't have her permission to mention her name. I know a female pastor that I'm close to. She has less than 100 members, right? And she and I was talking after the campaign and everything, after Kamala lost. She said, Pastor, she said, Pastor Weathers, nobody reached out to me. She says, nobody got in contact with me, reached out to me. And when I say reach out, she wasn't looking for a handout. They were knocking on the big church doors, sending surrogates to the big churches and everything. But here's the kicker. She said, Pastor Weathers, she said, they have to stop taking small churches for granted. She says, I have less than 100 members, but what they don't understand is I may have less than 100 members, but I registered, get ready for this. She says, I registered 1,500 voters in our community to vote in this election. So she says, no, I don't have 10,000. I don't have 1,000. I don't have 500. I have less than 100, but just because I have less than 100 that does not mean that I'm ineffective. I have less than 100 members, but yet I registered 1,500 voters to vote in this 2024 election. So that's problem number one, is that there's this caste system that when they come to town, right, they only go to churches that they think are prominent or churches that have numbers.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Let me stop you real quick.
Yeah.
When they come to town, who are they talking to? When they come to town, who are they talking to in order to know where to go?
So to my understanding, I could be wrong. I heard this many years ago before, doing political consulting, before working on campaigns and everything. I'm hearing that there's a list. I don't know if it's true or not, but I'm hearing there's a list of churches that they consider prominent, and those are the ones that they go to, or they go to the ones that have name recognition. Of course, they're going to come to Black Clergy, Philadelphia Vicinity, President of Black Clergy, and in all fairness, Bishop Felton is not, and Pastor Collier, who is a former president, they're not telling folks, oh, go to this church or go to that church, et cetera, et cetera. It's just those are the ones that they're going to Black Clergy. They're going to, I don't want to call out pastors' names. We know them, but it may come across like I'm trying to take a jab in the shot, and I'm not. But we know the churches that they target. And unfortunately, it's not like those pastors at those churches are saying, hey, you need to come to me and come to me only. But what the politicians are doing is they're creating a divide. And sometimes the mega pastors get hit with vitriol because it's like, why they going to them, but they ain't coming to us? So politicians are good at either doing it knowingly or unknowingly at dividing and conquering the Black Christian faith community. Because when you choose to go here, but you won't choose to go there, what you're saying is this group of pastor or this church is important, but we're not important at all. And it's unfair to that particular pastor because that pastor ain't asking for them to come. They are choosing to come, and then they get hit with vitriol because, the surrogates go to this church, the TV camera goes to that church. You follow me? And all of this is because of the fact that politicians look from a capitalistic perspective. They look at numbers and think numbers aren't impactful.
Okay, because I asked that because when Hillary Clinton was running against Bernie Sanders, and I was the pastor of Tenley Temple at that time, and Bernie Sanders came to Tenley, and the backlash we got was the mayor wasn't going to come. City council members were not going to come because they were with Hillary. But our city council persons and the other people are state representatives who represent us in that district would not come to a church in their district because it was seen as though that we were not towing the party line to support who they wanted to support. And even though Tenley at that point had less than 200 members, its name was still prominent.
Right.
Even though the area had gentrified and we were no longer the quote unquote strong Black church. But there was a church in South Philadelphia that was not as prominent, what was very, very, very active in its community and had the pulse of its community being made, and they did not get a phone call, they did not get a visit, they did not get anything. But that was the church to go to if you wanted to hit the community, right? Because they did community ministry and stuff like that. And so when we get back to what happens today in the inauguration of Donald Trump, which we all know that we wish and hoped and prayed that it had been a different outcome.
Right.
What do we do midterms? How do we catch the imaginations of our communities and our churches? Because right now I feel, Dr. Weathers, and I don't know if I'm correct or not, please correct me if I'm wrong, is that there's a major disconnect and there may be a major falling away from the Democratic Party among the Black church, among the Black community. What do you think about that? It
is a major falling away. It is a major falling away, especially after this election. I've had conversations and, I'll just be very candid. I could jeopardize any future opportunities, but I struggle. I struggle. Even after working this as a consultant, I struggle from what I saw at the national level. I want to give credit to Sister Pauline Moore, Reverend Minyar Culpepper, who I worked with in 2020 on a campaign, and we did some work in 2024, and it was crazy the stuff that we witnessed as as those who have experience working on campaigns, and we'll talk about that in a few. So I don't sound like I'm all over the place. Let me get to the point. I was getting ready to leave, and not because Kamala lost, but there's some things that I witnessed, and I definitely want to talk about the contract situation and everything, which is real deep. I saw some things that I said they're taking black voters for granted. They're taking the black church for granted. And why should I stay a part of a party that doesn't value what we bring to the table? And it was Sister Pauline Moore, Reverend Bill Moore, Reverend Dr. William B. Moore's wife, as well as Minya Culpepper. They both pulled me to the side. Reverend Minya Culpepper out of Boston said to me, Weathers, whatever decision you make, don't make it out of emotion. And then Sister Pauline Moore, she said to me, Weathers, don't leave. We need voices like you within the Democratic Party. She says, if voices like you leave, where will the party be? And so there is a mass exodus. It may not be as robust as most people think it is. I do know if there isn't a robust mass exodus, there is a robust conversation of mass exodus. Because I've had pastors come to me and say they don't know if they want to be a part of the Democratic Party anymore. One, they feel like their vote is being taken for granted. And let's call it for what it is. They don't. There's some positions that the Democratic Party has taken that they get villainized if they don't agree with it. And so what they're basically saying is, if I don't agree with it, you can villainize me and call me hate, but I'm just going to keep silent. But when I go to the polling booth, I'm not going to vote. I'm not going to vote for your candidate. I'm not going to vote for your party. And so those are some of the things that are talked about. But to go back to the premise, so I'm not like I'm all over the place and everything. There is talk of mass exodus. The problem with the mass exodus is exiting is not the problem. It's where do you go? Because saying I want to go, their exact words were, I would go to the Republican Party, but I don't agree with this MAGA movement, and I don't agree with the racism that's going on there. So they said, so I can't go to the Republican Party. Then I've heard some say, I want to be independent, but if I go independent, not independent party, just straight independent, I can't vote in the I can't vote in the primary. Right, this is I can vote in the general election, but I can't vote in the primary. So they say I find myself in a quandary. I don't believe in the values of the Democratic Party. I don't want to be Republican. I want to be independent. But if I become independent, then I won't have the opportunity to vote for various candidates in the primary. So I find myself in a quandary.
So as we look at the setup of the Democratic machine, and tell me a little bit how that structure. You talked a little earlier about the structure of how people get brought on. Are we putting the best and brightest? Are we paying the best and brightest in the Democratic Party to read our representatives on the ground? How did you get chosen, and then how did you get snubbed?
Great question.
I'm sorry.
No. You did
the way it is. Yeah, because then they chose you, and then they snubbed you.
No, yeah, you did right. So let's start with the best and the brightest. In some degree, right? They're choosing great people, to some degree, and then to other degree, they're not. They're not. I don't want to give a blanket statement. Oh no, they're not choosing the great people, et cetera, et cetera. No, I wouldn't say that. But what I would say is the problem here is Democratic Party, they choose what's popular, right? And so there is a millennial movement that's taking place, and I'm not knocking millennials or anything like that. There's a millennial movement that's taking place. So I have to put a millennial here, got to put a millennial there, because that's how we're going to draw young, progressive, African-American, Caucasian, Latino voters out, et cetera, et cetera. But there's also within some of them, not all, because I work with some great millennials. I work with some millennials that, wow, I'm not even going to give the characteristic here. But with some of the millennials that I work with and everything, it's all about, how can I say, it's all about a tribalistic mentality. This is my tribe. This is my crew. And I'm going to go out and I'm going to recruit my friends and et cetera, who may have been on campaigns, et cetera. And these are the folks that I'm going to bring in, but they don't have the experience. And then when you try to share with them A, B, C, X, Y, and Z, they hear you, but they don't want to hear you. Like case in point, there's certain ways that you interact with African American churches, and we're not monolithic. You got me? It's not one suits all. We're not monolithic. And like case in point, and the person didn't mean anything by it, so I don't want to villainize the person or anything, but here's an experience, right? And this is why you have to bring on an experienced faith person to watch the grenades that you can step on. So one day I get a call, right? Person's nice and everything. So again, I'm not villainizing him, but this is just a fumbled opportunity. Not fumble opportunity, just say a misstep. So I get a call and I serve with Bishop Felton, Mount Airy Church of God in Christ. I'm his first vice president. He's the president of Black clergy. There's a first vice, second vice, and a third vice. I'm the first vice, right? So I get and I also serve again as political affairs committee chair. So get ready for this. So I get a call and it says it's a Friday, and I want to just give the time frame Friday. And the person says to me, Pastor Weathers, what's the best way to get in contact with Bishop Felton? And I was like, really, you call me for that? And I said, okay. I said, if I don't reach, I said, when I call Bishop Felton, and if I don't get an answer, I text him. And once I text him, he'll respond. He'll respond in a certain time frame because Bishop Felton's schedule is busy, right? So I said, if I don't catch him by phone, I text him. Here's the next thing. It says, oh, because Joe Biden is coming to town and we're taking him to Mount Airy on Sunday. And we're taking him to Mount Airy on Sunday. And I'm saying to myself, you big dummy, you don't know if Bishop is going to be there. So immediately I make a call, right? I said, let me see if I can do a 3-way call so Bishop can be made aware. Bishop was out of town unbeknownst to me. So President Felton was out of town. I didn't know. So I said, I couldn't catch him. So I did a group text. Someone I know at Mount Airy called me the next day. They said, well, I want to keep you in the loop. They said, we just learned that the president's coming to town. This Saturday. We just learned the president's coming to town. And Bishop wasn't informed until Friday afternoon, Friday evening. It says, so they said, so now we're running around like chickens with our head cut off because you got Secret Service and things like that. Johnson, that's not what you do. Thank God, Bishop Felton was able to accommodate. It was a great opportunity for Mount Airy Church of God in Christ. But I'm told on Friday, right, president's coming to town, and we're taking him to Mount Airy. You didn't ask the pastor's permission, right? You just automatically assume. You got me? Automatically assume that it's okay to take the president to Mount Airy Church of God in Christ. But out of respect, you don't make that scheduled event until you talk to the pastor. Period. Bishop wouldn't have had a problem with it, but it's out of respect and out of protocol.
Right. When Barack Obama was coming to do a slow roll in front of Telly Temple during the convention, and we were told 6 months in advance that the president's motorcade was going to do a slow roll past Tenley to just do a photo op.
Mm-hmm.
They set up that 6 months in advance. So I had 6 months in advance to get people staged and then when it looked like it wasn't going to happen, I was assured it's going to happen, but in this time frame.
Mm-hmm.
So when the motorcade came down Broad Street to do the slow roll, I explained to my congregation that it's a slow roll. He's going to stick his hand out the window and he's going to wave to people, but it's going to be a photo opportunity.
Right.
Well, unbeknownst to me, the motorcade stopped. And when the motorcade stopped, the lady who I was talking to came over to me and said, Reverend Johnson, he's going to get out the motorcade and come over and shake her hand and shake a couple of you. Who is your oldest member?
Mm-hmm.
And I told her who my oldest member was. At that point, it was Darth Reddick. And he got out and did whatever. And that's how you run a campaign. Bernie Sanders was last minute, but last minute is 2 weeks
to
come to Tenley. Is it the fact that these people who may be engaging with church are not churched?
Yes. Period.
So how can you have non-churched people running a campaign and want to deal with church folk? That's my question.
Boom. That's
So
all I'm going to say.
You're not respecting the institution in which you want the votes.
Now, some of those who are not church will put people around them who are, in all fairness.
Okay.
You got me? But even when you put people around you, when you're not church, you got to be willing to listen to the people that you put around you who are not church to give you the intricacies about church. You follow me? But that was a lot that was going on. I can't say a lot. Let's just say from what I experienced in this campaign, that it was either non-church, those who are not affiliated. There was some that did. So I don't want to give this perspective that because there was an organizer that was brought on in Pittsburgh, wasn't clergy, but was familiarized with the church community because I think her father was a pastor. So she knew the ins and outs of the intricacies of a church. So I don't want to come across like it was just totally nobody or anything like that. I think the bigger problem here is that when let's really talk about it, you talk about the snubbing and everything. The bigger problem is not the people who are unchurched, not saying unchurched, that's a bad choice word, who may not know the intricacies of the church being positioned to organize churches. It's the headquarters. Yeah, it's the headquarters that wouldn't fund faith community coordinators in battleground states.
No, say more. No, that's
So,
that's where I think that our audience needs to understand, where did the dollars go in our communities of faith to get out the vote? And please speak to that, because a lot of people think that it's just a bunch of hype. But there are dollars that were not spent in our communities because I did not feel the energy or the hype around this campaign as much as I did Obama's.
So I'm glad. So this is multi-layered here. So this is going to be a lengthy narrative, right? So you ask, how come I did not work the Harris campaign on the Pennsylvania side, in the state of Pennsylvania, even though I worked the Biden-Harris campaign in 2020. Those who were running the national campaigns, right, to my understanding, would not fund faith coordinators in battleground states. Pennsylvania, I think they may have had one in Georgia, if I'm not mistaken, but I think they pushed that. But Wisconsin, I could be wrong, but this is what I was told at the headquarters level. Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Michigan, North Carolina. I think Georgia may have been the only one, right? And so the reason why secular people, not secular, those who may have been in church but may not understand the intricacies of the church, was put in positions to organize churches because the headquarters wouldn't fund faith community coordinators, which doesn't make any sense. But yet we were brought together, right? I worked with folks from Obama's campaign, oh my God, Hillary Clinton's campaign, a diverse campaign. We were all brought together when it looks like this election was up for grabs or possibly going to be lost. We came together and volunteered, right? Really, we're meeting 3 times a day, morning, afternoon, and evening. No, twice a day, morning and evening. We're meeting twice a day, organizing battleground states. So to go back, so I don't come across all over the place. One, there wasn't an investment in faith community coordinators, right, to help turn out voters. That's problem number one. Problem number two is when you talk about money invested in churches, not churches, money invested to our communities. So it was around October, and we're told that there was some money that was going to be distributed to boots on the ground in faith communities and everything to turn out voters. And then somehow along the line, it was rescinded. And so we're trying to follow out what in the world is going on. And it's not like we're looking for handouts or anything. We're like, how can we get, money and dollars and boots to the ground so that we can turn out the community voters in battle states where our churches are located, et cetera, et cetera. Here's the kicker. So someone, I can't mention the name because I don't have their permission, but this is actual fact, and I'll state it on the record. This is what was said to us in the meeting, that the national campaign basically said they're not giving any more money to churches. And I said, giving any more money to churches? When did they give money to churches from the get-go? Because unless I missed something, I don't know of any churches in Philadelphia that got money, et cetera, et cetera. Here's the kicker. They said somebody high up, they didn't mention any names, somebody high up decided that they were going to give major money to denominations. Yeah. Yep. Give major money to denominations. And so with their thought processes, and they didn't name the denominations, but it was plural denominations. So they would give the money to the denominations, thinking that the denominations would trickle the money down to boots on the ground within the community that would turn out voters. You know me, I'm outspoken. And I said to the persons that in that meeting, I said, whoever made that decision to give money to denominations to thinking that the denominations will funnel that money down so you got boots to the ground on the ground, I said, that's the dumbest thing anybody could have done. I said point blank, it's the dumbest thing somebody could have done. You don't give money to denominations. If you want to put boots on the ground, then you put the money where the boots are so that you can get turnout. So there was this mindset that we're not giving money to churches, right? Because we gave money to denominations and we didn't get boots on the ground and we didn't get a return from what it is that we invested in, which was dumb. It was dumb. So
if you give money to denominations, but who are you giving it to? Because if you're in a denomination like mine, predominantly Caucasian, and if the Caucasian church doesn't know how impactful the Black church can be in its own neighborhood because there's a disconnect there, even though it's in a denomination, those churches aren't going to get the money. Or maybe you're giving it to the denomination. I understand that the denomination is not in tune with the Democratic Party.
I don't know if it was Methodist. I don't know. I just was.
No, I'm just saying. I'm just saying.
Mm-hmm.
And so the disconnect. So Kamala Harris lost the election because of the fumbling and the bumbling of the national party. Is that what you're saying?
The fumbling of the national campaign.
Of the national campaign.
Of a national campaign. Now,
and so the national campaign helped to fuel the disconnect between the Harris campaign and the Black church.
Harris campaign, Black church, Black community.
Latino community.
That's a yeah. Like case in point, right? So you talk about snub. Let's talk about snub. Let's talk about snub. I almost walked away and just was going to focus on the state level because that's who I was employed by, the state. I almost walked away from helping out at the national campaign, and I decided to hang in there because I saw the greater picture. So let me share with you what happened. And then I found out it just didn't happen to me, but it happened to others as well, other minorities as well. So when there's a campaign just called GOTV money, and let me explain to those on the podcast what GOTV money is, get out the vote money, right? And this is money that is given to those who put in a proposal so that you will turn out voters in certain states.
Mm-hmm.
So this one day I get this text message. It was a group text message that some millionaire donated millions of dollars to the Democratic Party for proposals for GOTV. And they were taking proposals, right? So I called the person was nice and everything, and not villainizing the person or anything like that, because the person I was working with at the headquarters level as we were strategizing to turn out voters. And I said to the person, I says, okay, I have a LLC, limited liability, LLC, limited liability corporation. And I said, I'm going to put in a proposal. And I said, but I just need your assistance. I said, I'm going to put in a proposal, but I don't want to put a financial figure in the, I don't want to submit a budget or a financial figure that undermines what I bring to the table. I says, nor do I want to put in a figure that comes across that I'm just trying to milk the campaign for money. I said, so what is the range that I should put a proposal in? Person says to me, oh, Wayne, you should think 6-7 digits. I'm like, whoa, 6-7 digits? That's what I'm saying. And I was like, are you serious? 6-7 digits? She says, Wayne, don't just think Philadelphia. Think the whole entire state. And so, you know me, I'm very sincere. So I'm not going to milk anybody for money, right? but I am going to put in a proposal that's serious, that's going to do outreach, because I was hearing the chatter throughout the state. No signs, no contact, no this, no that. So I sat down, I talked to our guest, who's soon to be our co-host, Larry Waltower, Reverend Dr. Larry Waltower, out of York, PA, Shiloh Baptist Church, my fraternity brother. And I was sharing with him, I'm putting this proposal together. And so he started giving me some ideas. Let's break it down into regions, blah, 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 this, that, so on and so forth. And so I put a major proposal together. And the first proposal, I'm not going to give the actual figures, but it was 7 digits. You know, when I say 7 digits, that doesn't include the decimal point on the right side. So yeah, it was 7 digits. And so, but the person said, before you submit the proposal, let's sit down, let's go over it, so we make sure every I is dotted and every T is crossed, so you don't, how can you say, eliminate yourself with a proposal that's not thorough, in so many words. So I met with that person after, I put it together. It was a statewide, man. It was the whole entire state. It was a whole entire state. That budget, although it was 7 figures, 24% was administrative costs. All the rest of it was, hiring people boots to the ground to do A, B, C, X, Y, and Z. And so when I met with the person, she went over it, and the person said, this is a great proposal. This is a great budget. But they said, Wayne, nobody's going to give you this amount of money for 30 days worth of work. Scale the financial figures back. So I went back to the table, right? And I was like, wow, I really got to scale this back. So I scaled it back. And so I gave them an option A and an option B. So the proposal included, I'm not going to give all because I don't want somebody from the podcast taking and running with it, but I was partnering with Chris Jimenez with Healing Community so that we can do statewide voter registration for those who may have been incarcerated, but yet can still have the right to vote, right? There was a piece in there for phone banking, text banking, and there was some other pieces in there. That's just a little summary of what we was going to do. It was robust, but that's just a little snippet of what we were going to do. And so when I did an option A, option B, option A, it was 6 figures. I don't mind sharing this. One was like 340,000. The other was 670,000. The difference is the 340,000 had radio spot ad. It was without radio spot ads. 670,000 was with radio spot ads. So I submitted it, and then I was told the funds was frozen for whatever reason. I didn't think anything about it. So next, I went to Atlanta. About a few weeks later, I went to Atlanta to visit my daughters and my granddaughter. But the person who was helping me out, she was located in Atlanta. This is a long story to get to the point about the snubbing. And so I went and met with her because I was like, wanted to build a professional relationship. And I'm thinking after the election, right? I have, my own consulting business. How can I utilize this business relationship to get additional contracts after this election for my consulting business? So we have lunch and everything, and we just talking about just the craziness of the campaign. She told me the Georgia State operation was more organized than the headquarters, which is crazy. And so she said, Wayne, there's a pile of money coming in. It's not a lot. She says that proposal that you submitted, resubmit it. But she said, don't go over 300,000. And so I go back to the table, right? I rework. I had to cut all the locations. I could only narrow it down to 3 locations in the state of Pennsylvania, right? And I had to cut all services that I had. I had about 5 or 7 services that was going to be offered. I had to limit it to 2. And I barely brought it in at 300,000. So I did a whole bunch of cutting. It was very intense. So then I get a call from a group. It could be singular, it could be plural, but people that were looking out for me. They said to me, they knew I had to put a proposal in. I didn't run my mouth. They just saw it. And this group said to me, whether the money's come in, be expecting a phone call. They said, don't mention my name, but be expecting a phone call. So when I heard from a certain group of people and everything, I just kept my mouth shut. But the person who told me to put in a proposal says, we're still trying to find you some money. And I'm saying to myself, well, you don't know. I just got a call from a group that said the money's come in, blah, blah, blah. So now here comes the kicker. I tell you this long narrative because here comes the snub, right? So then they brought someone in, and I knew of him. Don't have nothing against him. I knew of him from the previous campaign that I worked on. He came on, right, at the headquarters level. And he's not not from the Pennsylvania area, politically connected, but not from the Pennsylvania area. Got contacts in Pennsylvania. And then when he comes on, less than 24 hours, he sends out an email that said that he got money to get ready for this, voter turnout in Pennsylvania. And I'm saying to myself, hey, I just got this email, right? And this email says that he's doing voter turnout in Pennsylvania. Did they give the contract to him and not to me? I just trying to get clarity. The group said, let me check into this, and we'll talk about it the next day. So whoever's part of the group brought me in with the person who sent the email. Get ready for this. Person says to me, Wayne, the Democratic Party has given me $250,000. Mind you, I came in at 300. Gave me $250,000 to do voter turnout in Pennsylvania. The crux, get ready for this, the crux of the $250,000 that we received is from the contact list that you created 4 years ago. So what I need from you is I need you to get me a list of the pastors from that list, because we got money for text banking, phone banking, transportation, breakfast, etc. Johnson, that was the stuff that was in my proposal.
Yeah. So somebody took your proposal and gave it to share it with somebody else so they didn't get money.
They would lie and say they didn't, but I'll just say this so I don't get hit with slander. There were similarities there. That's all I'm going to say. There were similarities there. And I was hot. And the old me, saved and everything, would have handled it differently than who I've grown to be right now.
Right.
And so to avoid from popping, because I was getting ready to explode, I held my tongue, I stepped back, and I was getting ready to say, I'm done at the headquarters level. And then I talked to one of my colleagues, unbeknownst to my colleague, right? He put in a proposal, not for Pennsylvania, but for another battleground state. He worked many campaigns, and he didn't get a contract either. And so what we found out was there was a certain group of minorities that put in contracts that never got it.
And that is why Kamala Harris, partly of why she lost this election.
Yes.
So we have a few minutes left.
Yes.
2026. 2027. Midterms and then moving forward. How do we right the ship? Look into that camera and talk to the folk who are on the ledge. Talk to the people who have kind of thrown their hands up and walked away. Give them a reason to stay.
I can't. I can't. That's the bottom line. I'm not encouraging them to leave. I can't. And let me reframe that, right? Let me look into the camera and talk to the Democratic Party for those who are listening, right? The Democratic Party must be willing to have courageous conversations. And until they're willing to have the courageous conversations, they're going to be in this position 2 years from now and 4 years from now. And the courageous conversations they have to have are the following. How do we connect with disenchanted African-American voters? Because you and I are post-civil rights, but our kids is not. So chances that we are loyal to the Democratic Party is greater compared to our children's generation who are now adults. And until they're willing to have that courageous conversation and really be able to sit down and talk to African Americans, not the so-called either elites or pseudo elites that you think has the heartthrob of the community. Unless you're willing to have that courageous conversation, we'll find ourselves back where we are today. Second conversation a Democrats Party need to have is, how are you going to merge the cultural rights beliefs that you espouse to compared to those within the Democratic Party that don't believe in those cultural rights? What I mean by that is, one of the divides that's happening that nobody wants to talk about, but I hear it on the ground, is the issue of same-sex marriage and abortion. And I've sat in barbershops, right, and had barbershop conversations, and I've had conversations with clergy and non-clergy. And in those conversations, I